Hello, everyone, and welcome to Claris Community Live. I'm Rosemary Teege, the Claris Community Manager and your host for today's session. And with me, I have Angie Wong from Claris, who's helping produce. And it's my pleasure to introduce Eric Luce, who's going to talk about building web apps with FileMaker data. And I'm thrilled that Eric was able to join us for two reasons. First, he has a new baby, so he's had a kind of crazy month of June. And second, because he had one of the most popular sessions at Claris Engage 2025. So he's going to share a lot of what he shared at Engage, but in a more interactive format. So please, as he's speaking, feel free to ask questions and I'll interrupt him. And also, as we get started, please fill out our opening survey so we know how much experience you have building web apps with FileMaker. And to do that, click on the apps down in the corner, and I just realized I haven't started the poll yet. And then in a minute, you should be able to see the poll as soon as I start it. And while I do that, Eric, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So, as Rosemary said, my name is Eric Luce. I'm streaming here today from Salina, Kansas, middle of the country, and yeah, I just had my third boy was born only 3 weeks ago. So we've had I've been away from my computer for a little bit, trying to, readjust to our new normal, but it's been really great. Yeah, I work at Proofgeist as a senior software engineer. And I'm not sure if that's the right, I sometimes call myself a web FileMaker developer, right? Because I do a lot of FileMaker connected stuff, but I work a lot more in the JavaScript ecosystem. So even though I've been with FileMaker around 10 years now, a lot of that is done with all sorts of JavaScript or web app integrations. So excited to show all that to you all today.
All right, and a couple people have chimed in with congratulations in the chat.
Thank you.
And also a question of when can we watch the Claris Engage seminar? And I think we are going to be making those public next week, right, Angie?
Cool.
Yeah, so watch for an announcement in Claris Community. If you're not subscribed to the Claris YouTube channel, and where they'll be published as a full playlist. So, and just also, the next question everybody keeps asking once they get access to the sessions is how do you get the session materials? The easiest way to do that is to download Engage to Go. And so we'll make sure to share that link when we share the announcement as well, because all the session materials are linked from Engage to Go. And Eric, question for you. Do any of your kids code yet?
Ooh, not they are close. We're not quite there yet. My oldest is only 4.5, but I can see their brains are already solving problems. They're going to be they are little problem solvers in their own ways. So I'm sure one day it will come.
Yeah, it was fun to meet them at Claris Engage because
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you
they
got
built
to
up
see
on
them. They kept coming up to Rosemary and giving her, showing them your badge and stuff. They got they
yeah,
were so happy.
yes. All right. Well, I just want to share some results from the poll. Looks like most people have done some method to publish things to the web with FileMaker data to the web. Most FileMaker WebDirect is by far the most common. Also, that's about 3/4 of the people. About half have used the FileMaker data API. Some have used the old PHP API, and then smattering of other methods. And like it's encouraging to see about 15% have used Claris Studio. And then for JavaScript experience, clearly we are all in the little bit. So about 60% of the audience says I have a little bit, 25 are comfortable, and then, so just so you know, that's where we are.
Okay.
Oh, and then we've got a few people who've been here for 30 plus years and have used CDML and Blue World Lasso to publish to the web.
There we go.
And I actually did a site with CDML way back in the day too. So, all right, well, why don't we get started?
All right. see. So are you doing the intro or do you want me to see?
Why don't you just take it away? Share your
Okay.
screen and
So I know before we get started, it sounds like a lot of us have published FileMaker or data from FileMaker to the web in the past. But I just wanted to start kind of setting the stage. Why do we do this, right? Like, what is the point of some of this sometimes? At ProofGeist, we work with a lot of people who ask us this question: should I use WebDirect? Should I use a third-party tool, or should I just build it from scratch? Or maybe I have to hire a web developer that knows how to do these kinds of things. We get a lot of these kinds of questions. The most common cases and like the reasons why people want to do this is for something like when an authentication is required, say like a customer portal, maybe an internal portal for known users, or maybe for users that want to use their mobile phone. So we've built some apps that you need to do it, but it needs to be cross-platform. They don't want to have to download an app or know how to launch FileMaker Go, that kind of thing. So it's like they just need a quick click a link and work on your phone. But the other use case for this is not just web apps, but also web integrations, we might call them, or web apps that are built inside of FileMaker, inside of the web viewer. There are lots of cases where we'll build full interfaces inside of a web viewer that is directly connected to your FileMaker data, and that's really helpful for data that's difficult to display using native FileMaker tools like resource scheduling or calendars or Kanban boards. So there's lots of reasons to do this. And what I'm going to show you today is how to do probably what is known as the most complicated route, right? How do we do this with all the code, as where you might think that you have to hire a third-party developer to do it. But hopefully I'm going to give you just a taste of how it might be easier than you might be thinking, especially for all of you who say, I don't have much experience with JavaScript. That's kind of my goal. And this isn't to say that that this is like the best way to do it and everybody should be doing it this way. There are trade-offs with any kind of tool, even within the frameworks and the systems that I'm going to show you today will have its ups and downs. So this is just going to be my perspective on it, but I'm hoping, my goal entirely is that it's easier than you might have initially thought. So if it's okay with you, Rosemary, we might just do a live demo and we might just build a web app from scratch. How does that sound?
that sounds like a great plan.
Okay. So we're gonna try it. You can see my screen here and I just have a terminal window open. Hopefully none of you are too afraid of the terminal. It's just chatting with your computer, different kind of the old school chat bot, right? So don't be too afraid of the terminal. We're not going to be here too long. But in here, what we've done is we've built a tool to help you start a new web app from scratch and build on it over time. So we're going to use that today. I'm also going to warn you before I get too far started that I'm probably going to go way too fast for anybody. I don't think it's possible to get through everything if we slow down too much. So feel free to watch the recording again later, check out some documentation sources, but the goal is just to see how possible this is, right? So try not to worry too much if you lose track, but also feel free to ask questions. So to get started, I'm going to type one command, pm create proofkit. I'm going to create a new proofkit project. And this is the tool that we built, and it's going to walk me through a bunch of things for this app. I'm going to call this Community Live app, I guess. And you can see here, it's already going to ask me, do I want to build a web app that works in a browser, or do I want to build something in a web viewer? We're going to focus on the browser case for now, but a lot of this is going to be transferable. And now it's going to ask if I want to connect to a FileMaker database. So I'll say, yes, that sounds exactly like what I want to do. So it's going to ask for the URL of my FileMaker server, which I have on my clipboard here. The only requirement here is that we do have AutoFMS installed on the server, which I have. But now that we have that installed, I can go back to my terminal and I can see all of the files that are currently hosted on that server. If you're just playing around and you don't have a file that you want to connect to right now, you can deploy a brand new file, which is using the AutoFMS tool to install that file on your server. But for my case, I do have this demo file
All
that I'll
right.
be connecting to, which has got a lot of data.
And I'm going to interrupt you for a couple
Yeah,
questions.
please.
So first, is this a tool that we can use, that anybody
Yes.
can get? Yes. And
Yes,
stay
and
tuned.
yes.
We'll share links to both ProofKit and AutoFMS.
Yes.
I
And by
do
the way, these are
see
all free
handy that,
too, as well. There's
yes.
open source free tools that anyone can try.
And then what is PNPM?
PNPM is a package manager. So it's one of those things I'll probably touch on a bit later as well. But a package manager is a tool that helps you install all of the various code libraries that you need to build a web app. PNPM is one of a few different variants. It's the one I chose because it's a bit more performant. It uses less disk space on your computer when you have lots of web apps. Anyway.
Okay. And the last question is, can you use AutoFMS with FileMaker Cloud?
You cannot, because FileMaker Cloud, you have to install FileMaker. AutoFMS has to be installed on the server, and FileMaker Cloud does not give access to do those kinds of installations.
Yeah. One last question. Can you use NPM as a package manager instead?
You can, yes, you can. I will say that I've tested it more with PNPM, but NPM should also work in theory just as well. So,
All right.
all right.
So,
But yeah, PNPM is usually just add a P in front of it. If you're familiar with NPM, it's extremely similar. So if you're familiar with NPM already, it should be pretty much the same. All right, but I'm going to continue here if that's okay.
Yeah, actually, there's one
Questions?
last question, and I think you may want to answer this one. And that is, can you do this using tools with which people are already familiar? And
I guess that depends on which tools you're familiar with.
right.
But if you're talking about if you're talking about NPM or versus, I guess I'm not, it depends on which tools you're talking about. I'd have to ask.
All right. Well,
yeah.
I will let you continue and then.
Okay. We'll come back to some of the, like, how to do this yourself. It's all in the documentation. I'll walk through that page once I get this app fully built. So I'm going to connect to, or maybe we should actually, there's enough questions. Let's take a break and switch to that. Yeah. So proofkit.dev, I think maybe this was in our agenda. We were going to talk about it. What is proofkit maybe? So proofkit, I've labeled it, this is an open source tool that we built at Proofgeist. It's a collection of tools for building FileMaker aware JavaScript applications. This is for new and experienced developers. It's got tools. The CLI is what I'm showing kind of in the middle of now. And it connects to the data API, and it can help you build web viewer apps. And this is the create command that I showed as well. If I go into this getting started guide, which again is all on this website here, it'll tell you, here's what you need to install. Here's links to install Node if you don't have it, links to install a code editor, links to install Git, PNPM if you need it, because NPM comes with Node. PNPM is one more download, but all these are free tools. So it just kind of walks you through those steps as well. And we will come back to this as we go on, but I do just want to show what Proofkit can do, and then how, if you've never built a web app before, how it'll help you get started. So, yeah.
All right. Well, let's keep building.
All right. So we entered the URL to our FileMaker server, and it was able, because of AutoFMS, it was able to detect which files are hosted. So I'm going to pick my Foxtail demo file. But now it needs to connect to that file in some way. So it needs the credentials for that file. AutoFMS has a system of doing this with API keys, which are kind of in place of your username and password. I've already created an API key previously, which is why it's suggesting it to me here. It's just using the FM REST privilege set to access it. If I hadn't done that, I would just create a new key here and it would ask for my credentials. I honestly don't remember what those are right now, so we're going to use the existing one. It's all the same. And now that it can access the file, it's able to read all the layouts in that file. And so I want to read the data from, say, my customer's layout, which is, I've built an API layout for reading the data. So I'll pick that. I got to give it a friendly name. I'll just press enter to do the default. And that's it. Now we have built our web app. It's going to run through a couple steps. It's doing the install, and yeah.
Yeah, and so I just want to do call out that, as when you're doing anything with the data API or the execute data API script step, it's really important to have those clean API specific layouts built in your app for
Right.
performance.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm going to show that layout here in a second, but it says here that we've done this thing. Now, again, if you've never built a web app before, I want to show you kind of what this did behind the scenes. If I just say open period, this will just open my current folder in the Finder window. And what you can see is it's created a folder called Community Live, and inside that folder is just a bunch of files, and this is a web project. Right, that's all it is. This is what a web project looks like, is a bunch of files. There's some JSON files, there's some TypeScript files, there's some configuration files, but we don't have to worry about any of that because this tool is going to do a lot of stuff for us. So, but it tells us here, navigate into the project directory. So we either change directory, or I can just open it directly in my code editor. So I'm going to type code community live, press enter, and this will launch my code editor. Now I'm using here a code editor called Cursor. It's extremely similar to a code editor, VS Code. You may have heard of any of these. Cursor has got some really great AI integrations that we're going to go into a little bit later, which is why I'm using this one, but VS Code would work just fine as well. And it's getting more AI. So everything is getting AI. Anyway, but now that I'm inside of this project, you can see the same files I saw in my Finder window are now along the left-hand side. And if I go up to my terminal, say new terminal, now I'm running a terminal inside of this project, which is where we need to live for the rest of this. And if I want to see my web app, I just run the pnpm dev command, which will start up a web server locally on my computer. It'll give me a URL that I can command click on, and now I can view my web app that's running on locally on my computer, viewing it in a browser. Here it is in Safari. It's not that exciting of a web app yet, but this is a web app. This is a web page that is being served to me as HTML. I've got some instructions on here, some links to the docs. Maybe I don't have links to the docs here, but anyway, there's links to the GitHub, I suppose. And this is the basic web app. I'm going to double check our agenda to make sure I'm not going off track.
I think
but we're good. So
you're good.
Okay, so this, again, not a very exciting web app, so let's make it more exciting. I'm actually going to close this and go back to my cursor. I've got an extra cursor open on my other screen. Let me hear that. Okay. So ProofKit helps you build an app, but it also helps you add to an app. So if I press Control-C, which will cancel my running dev server, I can run the ProofKit command again. And this time what we'll see is that it asks, hey, I found you already have a ProofKit project. What do you want to do with it? And we can add things, remove things, a bunch of other stuff. So let's add a new page. I'm going to press enter, add a new page. This is going to be my customers page because this is the data we loaded from. And I want to use this infinite table thing. This is just a template that we have built into ProofKit. There's a lot more templates that we hope to have available soon. I've been working on this off and on as the baby's been sleeping. So, so yeah, so it's done those things. Now it's added the page, but in order to view that page, we need to start up the dev server again. And while that's running, let me also just open my FileMaker file again. So this is the file, the Foxtel demo file. This is the API customers layout, very simple, okay? And I also do want to point out, maybe you've already noticed, that we do have 29,000 records in this table. Some of the questions we've gotten at ProofGeist, they'll ask us, are you sure we should use FileMaker for our database? Isn't FileMaker too slow for that? And I don't know where people get this idea of us, because this is absolutely not true. So we're going to show you how can we load 29,000 records into a web app over the internet, right? This is a server that is, it's somewhere in the United States, and I'm here in Kansas, and we're going to load all these records into our web app. So if I go back and I click on this page, or open up my web app again, you can see that it's added the new customers tab for me, a new page, or I can just go to /customers on my web app. And there we go. We've loaded the data. Now, there is a little bit of a trick there because we did only load 50 of those records. But as I scroll, if I scroll, you'll see that it's just going to keep loading all the records, right? This is how we expect web apps to behave, right? And I can keep scrolling all the way to 29,000, but then we'd be here all day. Um, and normally you would think, well, I only have 300 records, but we can actually filter. I have no idea, James, right? I can filter the entire, and this actually, what this did behind the scenes is ran a FileMaker find to get these records for me. And now I only have 4 records, but it was across that whole 29,000 record set. And if that wasn't exciting enough, I can also double click on here and I can add, and I can actually change the records, change this to John Doe. And if I go back to FileMaker, you can see it's already changed that data for me. So we have got what we now have it's only been 20 minutes since we started the whole webinar, and we have a full web app up and running that loads data and can edit data in our FileMaker app hosted on a server.
Yep. And like you just got some appreciation for showing something with a high record count.
Great.
Because frequently our demos are very like everybody uses small quantities of data, and
Right.
this one with
and this is, I mean, I could have made a lot more data. Like with this method, there's no limit really. You can, you can have more stuff. So
great. Next question. How do you
my goodness.
authenticate data to specific users?
Oh my goodness, that is a great question. Because if we were to publish this, like there was no login, I could just view all my customers here. Probably not what we want. So so let's go back. Let's go back and try that. I'm going to cancel my dev server one more time, and I'm going to run pm proofkit. And let's just go ahead, add components. Let's add authentication to this web app. There's a couple different options that this tool will help you do. And I'm going to choose the FileMaker add-on option here. So I'm going to choose that. It's going to ask me for an email provider. So so when a user logs in or they forget their password or something, I need to be able to send them an email to send them a code. So we do have this extra service or something we have to do, although you can also do this. Say you already have an email sending system inside of FileMaker, you could implement that as well. We just need a way to send emails. These are some like web native ways, but I'll just pick other, doesn't matter right now. And it's going to do some installation, and it's going to spin and spin, and it's going to ask us for some things. Now this requires some extra tables in our FileMaker file to kind of keep track of all this. And so it's warning us, hey, I didn't detect those layouts in your file, so we need to go install the auth add-on. And this tool actually downloaded and installed the add-on for me. I just have to add it to my file. So I'm going to restart FileMaker Pro to make sure that it can pick up that add-on. And I'm going to open the file again, go into layout mode, and add the add-on. So it's opening up the file one more time, layout mode, into add-ons. Hopefully this isn't new to a lot of you if you've worked on add-ons before. But here we have FileMaker add-on auth, and I'm going to make sure nothing else is selected because, okay, that is good. And basically this is just going to add the necessary layouts and tables and fields that I need in order to make this work. And I'm going to go back to browse mode. Now that it's done that, I can just press enter to continue. It's going to recheck, double check I've done it, and now we can move on. As it's doing that, I did see a question about FM data API usage and limits, but those have been removed. Is that right, Rosemary?
That is right. Yes. So, and I don't even remember when we did this, but
it's within the last year, I think, that it kind of like happened finally.
Oh yeah. So, someone said FileMaker 21. Yes. So if you are on a current version of FileMaker, so FileMaker 2024 or FileMaker 21, we have completely removed the data API limits.
Usage limits. Yeah.
Yep.
And that was like such a huge thing. I was very excited about that because now we can build these kind of apps, and even though the limits were fairly generous in the past, like I think we ran into them once with a very high usage customer, but most of the time Like people didn't even run into them, but they were always nervous about it. So I'm really, yeah, but now it's great. No one even worries about it anymore. Okay, so auth is done. Back to this. I'm going to go back to my
So I did
dev
want to
command.
add one thing. I think there are
Yeah.
still some limits on FileMaker Cloud, and
Oh,
that's
maybe so.
because like there is cost to that infrastructure, but I don't want to speak to it specifically. If you have questions, I'd recommend talking to your Claris sales team member or the partners that you're working with.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got auth added on here. And actually, before I show this, I briefly want to jump over here to this source control tab. Just we'll come back to it later, but I want you, this is one of the things that's kind of important to know as we're learning web apps. Let me hide the terminal here. This is showing us all of the things that this tool, because I haven't touched any code yet. I think you've noticed. I've just been running some commands, walking through some menus, but this tool has made 81 changes to 81 files in my entire code base. If I want to learn more about how is all this working, I can just click on this and I can read the code and I can see what is it doing. Oh, I can see that here it added this thing here and it changed this and whatever. This is a really great tool for learning. And so I'm going to actually add here a little message. This is kind of like a checkpoint in my code that I added auth here. And if I commit all of these changes here, like so, into my source control, later, I'll be able to see like, okay, now what's changed since then, right? Kind of a little commit. So anyway, but let's go back. So back to the dev command, which will load up our server. And this time, if I load my app, I expect to be presented with a login page. And sure enough, here I am. Now, I don't have an account yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and create one. I'll enter my email. I'll enter a password. Yes, thank you. And this is where it's asking for that verification code. Since I didn't set up any email sending system, what'll happen is back in my web server on the server side code that's running, which is this locally in my computer, it just printed the code into my terminal here. So I can just copy that, paste it in, and now it's as if I got that email, right? But later we can go and connect that to a real email if we want. And now I'm logged in. So
That
that we're back in
is,
our app and
I'm like, that's brilliant because you just built, you didn't do anything. You added an
yeah,
add-on
yeah, it's just a
and
little add-on. And this has got, I mean, it's not a very complex add-on. It does email
right.
password, but it does, I can go to my profile and I can like edit, I can update my email or update my password. This
Yeah.
will send me an email to verify. Like if I change this email, it'll send an email to the new email address and it'll do all those things for you. The other great thing is this is like what we call like a self-hosted solution, right? So actually, if I do my Command K menu and I search for ProofKit auth sessions, this is the session that I'm logged in as this user. It's got a verified email. And there's tables for the password and the user account that you can now connect to your own user's table, or you can modify these fields. This is data that lives in your FileMaker app. And the other great thing is that I can just delete this record, right? And now that session is gone. And so if I refresh the page, I'm not logged in anymore.
Wow.
Right? You're able to kick a user out because you have that full control.
Yeah.
Of course, I
Another,
didn't I didn't delete the user, so I can just sign back in again, but that's the session's key. So
all right, next question. Is it
yeah.
possible and you said you can use other authentication methods than this one. Is it possible to build a web app that authenticates using many different SSL providers to a single app?
Absolutely it is. I would say, and there's lots of different ways to do that. That's why Clerk is the other option that the tool supports. So this is a separate service that like handles user authentication for you. I don't know if there's an easy demo, but like they have like just built in, oh, you want to log in with Google, log in with whatever, right? They just have a lot of that built in. And so that's probably the easiest way to do that. But it is also possible, of course, with this self-hosted method. It's just a little deeper customization. So
Yeah, there's a couple other really kind of deep authentication questions, and I mean, I think we have a little bit of time. So what's the relationship just generally in FileMaker between these authenticated users and the kind of native FileMaker managed security?
There is, so in this case, we're not using, I should say, traditional FileMaker security. What we're using is that API key that you added at the very beginning, which is probably a service account to access all of your data, right? And so that account, yes, can access records, but in this table component where we're loading data, which I could show that briefly. We might get a bit deep in the code here, but maybe it's worth it. Let's see. So if I go to my customers table, the action, this is where I'm fetching the data, and I'm this one's extra complicated because we're querying all the fields and we're adding them based on how the tables come in. But essentially, this is where I'm doing that find, right? And so I would have to append to that find any other restrictions I'd want to do. But this is a server-side function that I can get who is the currently logged in user based on my app login stuff. And then I could add that filter dynamically in here. So very possible stuff.
Okay. So that, for example, is how you might restrict records to specific
Yes.
users. Okay.
Right. And I know it's very high level. We're going through this pretty quickly, but
Yep.
yeah. But one other thing I want to show before we move on is if anyone, I know a lot of us have built web apps in the past. I heard that at the beginning. So we probably are familiar with the problem of a client coming, not us, of course. We would never do this as developers. But a client, let's say, comes in here and they say, this isn't correct. I want to change the field names to my database. I don't like how that looks, right? And FileMaker handles this just fine, of course. But we know that this breaks web app stuff, doesn't it? So if I were right now to go back to my web app and just refresh the page, all of a sudden no data is loading, right? And there's, it could, maybe this isn't how you would have expected it to work, but this might happen, right? Maybe you didn't see me change that field name, and all of a sudden your web app is broken and you have no idea what to do, right? What we can do is I can just come in here to my AI chat and say, why is no data loading in my table? And I'm going to change the model to, I guess we'll try Claude. I've had different experiences. This is a bit of experimentation, right? The main thing I want you to keep in mind for this demo is that you, as a developer, you don't know what's wrong. You didn't change the field name. Your client did, and they didn't tell you. And all they told you was it's broken, right? You also didn't write this code because you used a tool to help you do it. And you're not that familiar with JavaScript. So we're going to ask for help, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're noticing what's happening here is that this app knows that the AI actually knows about FileMaker. And in this case, my demo is failing a little bit. It's doing what it's supposed to do, but a tool here was not happy with it. So I'm going to do this part manually. So there's a command that will recheck the field names. Proofkit type gen. And I believe it was saying that it couldn't. I'm going to tell it to stop. Command not found. Well, you might just have to trust me here, because this command said it didn't find stuff. Path. Have it look that way. No. Well, that makes me really sad. I'll probably have this fixed by the time you watch the recording of this video. It's basically it couldn't redo the type gen, which is really weird. But anyway, if this had worked, file and maybe we'll just go change this manually so you can see how the AIs work. If I go into my generated customers layout and I manually change this back to the same, so pretend the type gen worked here. Then what will happen is, and I'll just tell the AI, I ran the type gen command. Now find the error. What will happen is it will cause an error in this I think in the table file is where it'll have a little red squiggly that says this isn't a valid field name anymore, right? And these types of errors are AI are really good at finding those, right? And so now it's trying to do the wrong thing. Let's just start over. Fix type error in this file. Oh, I didn't tell it which file. In the table file. Now it'll be able to find it. It'll know what to do. And I have to hit enter one more time. So even though this example failed, I hope you can see like this is what AI can help you do, right? Even if you don't know too much about what it is. And if it hadn't been able to tell you that, in this case, it was a bug with the package I was using. And sometimes AIs will help you uncover that. And you just don't, if you don't know about it, it's okay to ask. It's kind of the point. So, are there any other questions, Rosemary, or should we move on to the deployment section?
No, yeah, I think like that was the next question. A couple of people said, how do I deploy this? Actually, there was one other question. Maybe you want to touch on that first. And that is, okay, so we have an existing website that's not built with ProofKit, but clients want to add some FileMaker content to an existing site.
Yeah, so as long as it's built with like Node.js or something, like it depends on the type of site. Like there's just so many varieties out there. Like I said from the beginning, this is not the only way to build a website. But this is why ProofKit is not just the CLI. ProofKit is also a typegen tool, a web viewer tool, and the data API tool, right? So that if you want, if you have enough experience and maybe you don't like the hand holding or you don't need the hand holding that the CLI will help you do, you can absolutely just go into these packages. These are node packages or npm packages that are published that can work with any JavaScript app, right? So it does depend on how they're built, that website, but this is how you would do that, still with the ProofKit kind of ecosystem. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so let's deploy.
All right, so we fixed our web app, we fixed some bugs, we added authentication. Let's run the ProofKit command one more time, and we're just going to pick deploy. I'm going to pick our Proofgeist org because it'll run just a little bit faster since it's a paid thing. This is going to set up all the stuff for you, and it's just going to work. It's going to run, but this will take a couple minutes to do. So briefly, I want to talk about what's happening. So Vercel is a hosting platform. Vercel and Next.js are kind of built together, right? So I don't know if is this a link to Vercel? Oh, look at that. And they just had a whole conference. They announced a bunch of stuff. So Vercel is a place to host web code and host web applications. And they make it really easy to deploy. So the ProofKit integration just kind of integrates with that, and it's gonna push your web app up to Vercel. They've also got a very generous free tier that you can just try stuff out. And for simple projects, you might not even need to pay for it, depending on your usage of it. So, but Vercel is where we're pushing the code to, and Next.js is the web application framework that we've kind of used to build this app with ProofKit behind the scenes. And these are all open source stuff. Next.js is also self-hostable. I saw someone ask. It's a bit, there's some guides on how to do that with Next.js. You just want to learn how to do that. But if you want to use ProofKit to do it, that's why I'm telling you about Vercel. And now I'm stalling for time as I check. If I click this here, click this link, this you can see that it is building. It's running through a thing. We've got like our raw code, and we have to compile it to runtime web app code. And it's now I feel like it's going to fail on me, which is going to be really sad again because I've made too many changes while the baby was sleeping. And so it looks like it might fail here. But otherwise, if the build hadn't failed, then we would have gotten a URL that showed it, and instead it's just going to say, sorry, I couldn't deploy it, so we can't build. Another question I've got in the past, though, is like with Vercel, if you go into settings, you can go to domains. You can connect your own domain to it. and that doesn't cost anything either. So it can still be at whatever you want. Doesn't have to be a Vercel domain. The biggest challenge though is that the environment variables like your server and your API key, they have to be sent to Vercel. And that's really the main thing that ProofKit helps you do. But if you can handle this part of it, you can also deploy anywhere else you want. Yeah.
Yeah. Question about what would be your preferred platform for developing native mobile apps in the same way as a web app?
So platform is tricky to say. So whether React Native is probably what I would choose because it's a very similar to this Next.js framework, but that's a bit lower level. The platform itself might be Expo, expo.dev. They're doing a lot more things that I haven't looked into recently, but they will even host your web app code as well. And this isn't going to be exactly the same as a web app code, but it still uses React, which are these kind of components to kind of easily compose your app in different pieces. So that's probably what I would use for that.
All right. And well, I mean, I'm sorry that your demo broke, but that is always
I know
the
it.
fun of live demos.
And I tested everything. That's the weird thing is I thought I had tested everything, but apparently I missed something. It would probably, let's see. I wonder, should I try to fix it? This might be a little. I bet if I add that old version of the CLI, I wonder if that would work. We could try it.
All right. Well,
Because that was the error it gave me. But then it
that
said not found. Well, that's weird.
happens. So
Anyway.
first, there's one comment. I've tried ProofKit, and it was really useful and fast
Oh, thank you.
from Joe. I had every intention of trying ProofKit in the last week, but I got really busy working on some other things and didn't have time to do my own planned experimentation. But I do plan to once things calm down a little bit and I have some time to dedicate to learning. There's a question about developing tips or documentation for connecting FileMaker to a PHP website.
So yeah, I am not really a PHP developer. That's I long ago I wrote some very simple stuff, but nothing like production level. I do know there are other PHP libraries for the FileMaker data API that you could probably use. And it's probably not a bad idea to kind of just talk about that in general. Like FileMaker as a database for a web app is no better or worse than any other database that you need for a web app, right? Usually within web applications, the caching of how many times you hit your database, the database is usually the slowest part of any web app is like the one thing to say. And that's true of any database, not just FileMaker, right? So the trick is, and whether you're using PHP or Node or any other way to build web apps, is you want to hit the database, you want to call the database as little as possible. And so there's like 1,000 different strategies on how to do that. Next.js they have a lot of built-in caching, which is why we choose it. So you can tell it like, hey, when I query for this data, if I query it again within the next 15 minutes, just use the cache instead of actually asking FileMaker for it, right? But caching is one of those complicated problems because every use case is different and you expect it to be cached and then it's not cached and you get the wrong data and they're like, why is the data not the right data? I changed it in FileMaker. Like all these things kind of come into play. So it really depends on your use case. When it gets to really large records or a very, very high number of users, we have to start thinking about it. But until then, this less caching is way easier to wrap your mind around. So that's what we'll stick with.
Okay. So a couple other questions. So first, I just want to alert everyone, I have opened our closing poll, which just lets us know what you thought, what you learned, if you're now inspired to try using ProofKit. And I'll share those results out in a few minutes. So do you have an example of a more complex site you've built using ProofKit? that you can just point people to or share, like something that's like more than just a table?
I don't know that I have something I can show right now. I'd have to get permission for all of our other apps that we built, but we definitely have built lots of stuff. Um, so yeah, the proof kit uh, tool, the templates I'd say right now are still very limited, but we're working on ways to vastly open those up. And really, the point is, I hope I can emphasize that the AI coding tools, if you don't know anything about web apps or JavaScript, if you can use an AI coding tool, if you can ask questions and be a problem solver, then you can ask a chatbot to write the complex parts for you. And you can say, I want this, I want a different page, or I want this to work. You describe a problem that you're having. How might I fix it? And if you're curious and inquisitive and are a problem solver, the AI chatbot can do the hard stuff that you don't know. Right. So please don't pass on that. If you haven't ever tried it before, just, ask in ChatGPT or whatever. So,
Okay. Next question. Can you use ProofKit to load container data via the data API? So if you've got container data in FileMaker.
I I forget how that. I don't do that often, to be honest with you, but I believe you can. When a container is on a field, you get back a URL that you can then load with. So yes, um, I do believe the FMDAPI package, I think, does not have a direct access to like uploading container data. Um, so it's something we may look at adding for sure, but yeah.
All right. And I'm going to just like answer this, even though the question came to me privately, I will answer it. Someone said, based on our upcoming community live calendar, starting July 9th, we have 4 episodes in a week, all to help you get started using FileMaker 2025. So there's a new version of FileMaker coming soon. And are there any details that we can share right now? I can't share any details beyond, yes, it's coming soon right now, and that there are major changes to FileMaker, how FileMaker interacts with AI large language models. We're bringing some AI tools to FileMaker Server. We're expanding the things you can do to integrate between FileMaker and Claris Studio and Claris Connect. And there's a bunch of other really like developer productivity focused improvements coming to FileMaker. So a couple things you can do. One, if you go to our Claris YouTube channel, you can see what we shared as kind of sneak peeks during the Claris Engage keynotes back in March. And the second is join us for all those upcoming community lives. Angie shared a link in chat to where you can go to register for all of those sessions. And I will also add that after each of those sessions, later the same day, our speakers will be joining Richard Carlton's live stream for an extended Q&A period. So if you can't join the 11 o'clock Eastern time or 8 o'clock Pacific time session in the morning, you can come later in the day to Richard Carlton's session, and all of those will be recorded. So we hope to see you there. And
So I got my deployment working. Hooray! We're at a URL now. Hooray!
yay! Also, question about what versions of FileMaker are supported by ProofKit.
So it's really just the data API. I mean, the data API library it's any version the data API works in, which I think goes back to 16 or 17. So, so that's not an issue there. I will say for the ProofKit CLI, as I mentioned maybe at the beginning, it does require auto FMS, but the ProofKit REST API does not. So, so like if you still just want to use like username password authentication, Instead of an AutoFMS API key, you can use this package as well. It's just you can't scaffold out your whole project and look up what fields are on your server, that kind of thing.
All right. Somebody answered the Auto FMS version requires 19.6 or later.
Yes.
Okay. Question about, data API kind of long-term, changing to OData over time. So I guess the question is, do you have plans to update ProofKit to work with OData?
We have thought about this. As far as I'm aware, the FM data API is not going away, right? We're moving focus to OData is what I'm hearing. So it's not like it's not like it's a bad option to keep using the data API where it's appropriate. And yeah, we are absolutely looking at using OData where it's appropriate, and hopefully, and maybe even some cool kind of combination of both APIs where appropriate. So all of that is in the back of my mind for sure. But yeah.
All right. Trying to see what else.
I think I see, did Chris Corsi mention that, yeah, the data API package does support container data, is what I think that's what he was responding to. So,
Yep.
yeah.
All right. I am just seeing other a couple other questions. One is a question about, is Claris going to make web direct publishing with FileMaker any fancier along the lines of what we did today? I don't think any of us can answer that question. My recommendation would be to come to the July 15th Community Live, where we'll talk about the FileMaker Pro server and WebDirect improvements coming soon. Yes, there's a list of upcoming sessions, Thaleen. I think Angie shared it in chat earlier. It's the community live page in Claris Community is the best place to get that. I will copy and paste that back in chat. It's always fun to watch questions come in at the end of the session.
I think I saw something, is that from Charlie about like a web viewer thing, and we don't have a ton of time, but I might be able to touch on that if you want.
Do you need to use an add-on to use JavaScript instead of a FileMaker layout? Yeah, his curiosity is piqued.
Yeah, so there is an add-on to help you install like a web viewer app for FileMaker. So I'm just going through the setup process again, using the same kind of stuff, just to create a web viewer app instead. There's an add-on that you can install that will add all the necessary things that ProofKit expects, and then you get a seamless experience for building the web app inside of a web viewer instead of a browser. I don't know that it's necessarily required, or maybe that's good or not, like depending on whether it's required to have an add-on, but there is an add-on available that makes it easier to kind of set up and install. So you may have seen that in, I think I have, where did this go? I have to load my layouts, I think. ProofKit Web Viewer. So if I open this layout here, and I'd have to cd web viewer and start my dev server so you can see it. And then I just refresh the web viewer. You should see my app, I think. Launch web viewer dev mode. But the add-on, if that doesn't work, since we don't have time, the add-on kind of gives you this folder. So you have the FM web viewer fetch and the web viewer kind of stuff. So there's scripts to like launch it. And then what this will do is, oh yeah, here it is. So this is my dev server now running inside of a web app. And if I were to go into, actually I cancel this. If I were to open this and say edit, let me search for this text in my code base, right? And I can add hello world here, and then run my dev server again. Then I would have to probably refresh, or it might be reloading. You would see that change here. So this is the same kind of interface. I don't know if that's answering the question, but yeah, and it'll prompt you to install the add-on. I just already had it for you. So yeah.
All right, I think we have one more question as I'm like skimming through, and that is how does record locking work?
Record locking. So there, by default, there'd be like no record locking, right? So you would make the change immediately, and it would commit the change, and it would be open again immediately. You could implement it if you wanted to. You just have to implement some scripts. So part of what the web viewer package allows you to do is you have JavaScript functions that let you call a FileMaker script, and you can either, with the fmFetch function, you wait for the script to finish and you get the result, or you can just call the script if you don't care about the result. And so you could implement any kind of system with this. Like, this is pretty low level stuff, but if you wanted to lock a record, let's say, you could use something like this to call a FileMaker script to lock it. Yeah, and if the commit fails, the data could be different. That is true. So it's all about how you perform your scripts, and there are ways in the JavaScript land to revert your change or not. So a lot of that is a bit more manual, for sure, about how you handle those key use cases. Yep.
Yeah, so I think one last question as we're getting to time. Is there support available for ProofKit if someone wants to pay for it?
Yeah, so we do have a community forum, which is on the, here's my mouse again. So we have a community forum that you can ask questions. This is all free. There's just like free, open, public support. If you want to pay for it, I guess you could hire us. I guess I don't deal with any of that, so I don't know. But there's no official support. I would say there's no like official support packages for this tool. It is open source, kind of community supported. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just going back to the kind of commits, record locking, etc. Does that behavior, you showed what happens in a web viewer, but what happens if the project is a web page?
It's the same idea, right? Because we're making an API call to edit or read the data only once. Whereas a FileMaker client has a persistent connection to the server, which is why we do have more limited user counts. Like if you have the more clients you have connected to your FileMaker server, the heavier the load is on the server. But for web apps, you make a call, get some data, and you hang up. And now you have the data, and the browser now has no idea what the server is doing or anything else that happened, which is why it scales to, millions of users in that different model. So, yep.
Yeah, and I think there's that like last question I think we can answer is, about what about data broadcasting, so that if a user in the office in FileMaker updates a record, like what happens to a user
Yeah.
on the web who might also be displaying that record?
Yeah, so that would probably involve a technology, either WebSockets or server-side events. And at this time, Vercel, like either your web server has to support that or FileMaker has to support that. And it does not, to my knowledge. So you'd have to use some other service that helps with that, and then it can be done. But yes, that would be the difference.
All right. Well, I think with that, thank you, Eric, for joining us. I want to call out thanks Chris and Chrissy and others from Proofgeist who engaged in chat to help us answer questions. And so we will, as I said, share the recording later, and I will also share the links to resources and some of the, there were a couple of requests we got for the survey feedback. So I'll share some of the survey results also in the community thread for this episode. So watch your email for the link to the recording and back to the Claris community page if you missed any resources. And again, I hope to see you in a few weeks, starting July 9th. as we help you all get prepared for FileMaker 2025.
Can't wait.
Thanks again. Bye.